I always thought family was supposed to be forever, that no matter what, they'd have your back, lift you up when you fall, and, at the very least, set a damn plate for you at Christmas dinner. But I was wrong. I learned that lesson the hard way, when my Aunt Margaret looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not family." It happened 3 weeks before Christmas. I was sitting in my tiny apartment sipping coffee that had gone cold while scrolling through holiday sales I couldn't afford. I had just started typing out a text to my cousin Lily. "Hey, what's the plan for Christmas this year?" When my phone buzzed. It was an email. I clicked it open. The subject line hit me like a slap to the face. Christmas gathering, family only. I felt my stomach twist as I read the message. It was from Aunt Margaret, the self-proclaimed matriarch of our family, the one who always hosted Christmas dinner at her gigantic house with the perfectly decorated tree and an expensive ham that she liked to show off as if she'd cooked it herself. "Dear family," it began, "we're excited to host another wonderful Christmas this year. We hope to see you all for a beautiful evening of love, laughter, and tradition. However, to keep things intimate, this year's gathering will be for family members only." That should have included me, right? That's what I thought, until I saw the last part. This means that, unfortunately, Olivia will not be joining us this year. My chest tightened. My hands clenched the phone so hard I thought the screen might crack. I read it again and again. I wasn't invited. Before I even had time to process the gut punch, my phone rang. "Lily, tell me you just saw that email," she said, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Oh, I saw it," I muttered, my throat tight. "What the hell, Liv? I just called Mom. She says Aunt Margaret's saying you're not real family because—" She hesitated, like she didn't want to finish the sentence. "Because what?" I pressed, though deep down I already knew. "Because your dad," she sighed. "Because Uncle James isn't your biological father." I went completely still. Right. That James, Uncle James to Lily, but Dad to me, had adopted me when I was 5 after marrying my mom. My biological father was a deadbeat who vanished before I even learned his name. Dad raised me, loved me, gave me his last name, and never once made me feel like I wasn't his. But to Aunt Margaret, that wasn't enough. I could feel the anger bubbling up in my chest, hot and sour. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "I wish I was," Lily said. "She's telling everyone it's just for direct blood relatives this year. And apparently you don't count." "Oh, but your mom's husband does," I shot back. "Uncle Rick married in, and he's invited." "Yeah," she admitted. "And Vanessa's fiancé, and my little stepbrother. Basically anyone but you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "So what? I've spent every Christmas there since I was a kid, and suddenly I don't belong? Liv, you know this is bullshit. Mom." And I tried to argue, but Aunt Margaret— "I don't want to hear it," I cut her off. "It's fine. Whatever. Liv, I mean it, Lily. It's just a stupid dinner. I'll be fine." I hung up before she could hear the crack in my voice. I sat there for a long time staring at my phone, my heart pounding with a mix of rage, humiliation, and something else. Something raw. I wasn't part of the family. I'd been cast out like I was nothing. Fine. If they didn't want me there, then they'd get exactly what they asked for. But they had no idea what was coming, because if Aunt Margaret thought she could cut me out and get away with it, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I was going to make sure they regretted it. I spent the next few days cycling through emotions so fast it made my head spin. Anger, hurt, resentment, and underneath it all, something even uglier. Doubt. Had I ever really been part of this family? Or had I just been tolerated? I found myself replaying old Christmas memories in my head, searching for moments I might have missed. Little glances, whispered comments, signs that maybe I never truly belonged. Had Aunt Margaret always side-eyed me when she handed out gifts? Had my cousins ever hesitated before calling me their family? Had my grandparents ever treated me just a little differently? I shook my head, shoving the thoughts away. No, I had a place in this family. I wasn't going to let some bitter old woman rewrite my entire childhood. But I wasn't just going to sit back and take this either. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I'd show them what an outsider could do. I just needed a plan. I started by talking to my dad. I expected him to be furious, maybe even storm over to Margaret's house and demand she take it back. But when I told him, he just let out a long, tired sigh. "I'm not surprised," he said. "Wait, what?" I blinked. "You knew she felt this way?" He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Margaret's always been old-fashioned. She never really approved when I adopted you." My stomach dropped. And you never told me? I didn't want you to feel unwelcome, he admitted. Besides, it never mattered. You were my daughter, and that was that. I wanted to be grateful for that, but all I could feel was the cold sting of betrayal. My own aunt had seen me as an intruder for years, and no one thought to warn me. I'm sorry, Liv, Dad said, reaching for my hand. I should have told you. I pulled away. Not because I was angry at him, but because I didn't trust myself not to cry. It's fine, I muttered. Really, it wasn't. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, seething. They wanted to act like I wasn't family? Fine. I'd play along, but I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I was going to make sure they felt my absence, and I was going to do it in the most spectacular, unforgettable way possible. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the right one. Lily. I hesitated for half a second before hitting call. She picked up on the second ring. Liv, hey, listen, I've been trying to— I need your help. I cut her off. I have a plan. She hesitated. Okay. Should I be worried? I grinned. Oh, absolutely. 3 weeks later, Christmas Eve arrived. And with it, my plan. Margaret had made one thing very clear. I was not invited. So I made sure they knew exactly what they were missing. Okay. Technically, I didn't control the weather, but fate must have been on my side because Christmas Eve brought one of the worst blizzards in years. Roads were shut down. Travel plans were canceled, meaning almost half the family couldn't make it to Margaret's house. Normally, that wouldn't be a big deal. They'd just call, video chat, maybe send pictures, but thanks to step 2, that wasn't happening. Lily and I had gotten creative. She convinced her mom, my Aunt Rachel, to turn off the Wi-Fi at Margaret's house, claiming it was acting up because of the storm. No Wi-Fi meant no video calls, no texting, no Instagram posts of Margaret's perfect Christmas dinner. They were completely cut off. And then came. While Margaret's Christmas was falling apart, mine was just getting started. Lily and I had organized an alternate Christmas dinner at my dad's house. We invited everyone who had been left out, brushed aside, or made to feel like they didn't belong over the years. Step-cousins, in-laws, people Margaret had forgotten to invite, and of course all the family members stuck in the storm who couldn't make it to her house. We cooked everything. Ham, mashed potatoes, stuffing, pies. We decorated. We played music. And then, just to rub salt in the wound, we took a giant family photo. We looked happy because we were happy. And then we sent it to the family group chat. It took about 2 minutes before my phone exploded with notifications. Let the message sit there, unanswered. And then I turned my phone off. I had family to celebrate with. The morning after Christmas, I woke up to chaos. My phone was flooded with 24 missed calls and over 100 messages. Half were from Margaret, the rest from various family members who either wanted to scold me or offer their quiet approval. The weight of the previous night lingered. But as I stretched and reached for my phone, I felt no regret. The soreness in my body was a reminder of a night filled with too much food, too much laughter, and board games that went on far too late. Margaret's messages dominated the screen, filled with accusations and frustration. She made it sound as if I had burned her house down rather than simply hosting a dinner. But then, a new message appeared. My father. His words were simple, yet they carried an unexpected warmth. He was proud. I had braced myself for his disappointment, expecting him to be upset about the conflict I had stirred. Instead, his words settled into my chest like an anchor, grounding me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had done something right. Didn't call him right away. Instead, I grabbed a cup of coffee and opened the family group chat. The reactions were mixed, but something was different this time. Margaret was losing control. Normally, she dictated everything, the invitations, the traditions, even the conversations. But now people were questioning her. Aunt Rachel was reconsidering our traditions, and even my father had chimed in, supporting the idea that things needed to change. Margaret, of course, hated it. She reached out not long after, her number flashing across my screen. There was no pretense, no greeting, just immediate frustration. She was livid, not just because of what had happened, but because she had lost control. The family was divided, people were questioning her authority, and she blamed me for all of it. She demanded I fix it, as if I could somehow undo the shift that had already begun. But I had nothing to fix. The illusion of unity she had built wasn't real family. It was an obligation masquerading as tradition, and for the first time, people were realizing it. Margaret spoke of blood and lineage as if those things mattered more than the people who actually showed up, who actually cared. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The silence on the other end of the call told me that she already knew the truth, even if she refused to accept it. And then, for the first time, she gave up. There was no counterattack, no dramatic retaliation. She simply disappeared. She stopped organizing events, stopped trying to control the family, and surprisingly, everything was better without her influence. Aunt Rachel hosted New Year's Eve. Uncle Rick started a monthly brunch. Lily and I planned a summer trip for our cousins, and not once did anyone suggest inviting Margaret. Life moved forward, and no one looked back. Months later, my father and I went for a drive. We didn't discuss Margaret. There was no need. He admitted he should have stood up for me sooner, should have questioned things long before they spiraled. To this point, I didn't know how to respond, so I simply reached over and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. That was enough. A year later, a single message arrived from Margaret. It was short, final. I had made my choice, and she hoped I was happy. I stared at the message for a moment before a smile crept onto my face, because for the first time in my life, I truly was. It started with a phone call from Lily. "Liv, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "We got invited." I frowned, pulling my gym bag over my shoulder. Invited where? To the winter charity game, the one with all the pro athletes. The biggest Christmas event of the year. I nearly dropped my phone. The winter charity game was huge. A yearly event where pro athletes, retired legends, and a few lucky amateurs played an exhibition basketball game for charity. It wasn't just about the game. It was about networking, sponsorships, and, most importantly, proving yourself on the court. Lily and I had been playing basketball together since high school. She had gone into coaching while I played recreationally, but we were both still serious about the sport. "How the hell did we get in?" I asked. Lily laughed. "Funny story. My cousin's fiancé works for one of the sponsors. He saw the drama with Margaret on Facebook and was like, 'This girl needs a win.' So, Merry Christmas." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. This was exactly what I needed, something bigger than family drama. A chance to prove myself in a whole new way. I hadn't played competitively in over a year, but the moment I stepped onto the court, it was like my body remembered. The squeak of sneakers on polished wood, the sharp, rhythmic bounce of the ball, the low hum of excitement from the crowd. I inhaled deeply. This was my world. The game was stacked with big names, NBA players, Olympic athletes, and a handful of well-known influencers who played for fun. Lily and I were the underdogs, but that just made it more interesting. As we warmed up, I noticed a familiar face across the court. Jake Carter, an ex-college basketball star turned trainer. Jake was the kind of guy who looked like he was sculpted by the sports gods. Tall, built like a machine, with the kind of presence that made people shut up and pay attention. We'd crossed paths before, but he had no reason to remember me, until now. The game was fast-paced, and for the first few minutes, I struggled to find my rhythm. Lily and I played well together, but the pros were on another level. They read the court differently, moved faster, and had ridiculous control over the game. I needed to prove I belonged here. Then, halfway through the first quarter, my chance came. Jake Carter, the Jake Carter, was coming down the court. He was quick, but I'd studied his playstyle before. He liked to bait defenders into thinking he'd pass, then explode to the hoop. Not this time. I anticipated his move, slid into position, and blocked his shot. The crowd erupted. Jake blinked at me, then let out a low whistle. "Damn, okay, I see you." I grinned. "Yeah? Keep watching." From that moment on, I played like my life depended on it, and I wasn't just keeping up. I was winning. By the end of the game, I was drenched in sweat, out of breath, and completely high on adrenaline. We lost by 5 points, but nobody cared. The underdogs had put up a hell of a fight. As we walked off the court, Jake caught up to me. "Liv, right?" he said, offering his hand. I shook it. "Yeah, that block earlier?" He grinned. "I won't forget that." I laughed. "Good. That was the goal." He hesitated, then said, "You ever think about going pro?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I had dreamed about it for years, but life had gotten in the way. Family drama, financial struggles, self-doubt. But standing here now, sweaty and exhausted, surrounded by some of the best players in the game, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't done yet. 2 days later, I got a phone call. Not from Margaret, not from my dad, from a scout. I was at the charity game. The voice on the other end said, "I like your style. Have you ever considered playing overseas?" I nearly dropped my phone. This wasn't just an invite to another charity match. This was a real opportunity, a chance to finally choose my own path. Not Margaret's version of family, not my dad's past mistakes. Mine. And for the first time in my life, I was ready. The email sat in my inbox like a ticking time bomb. Subject, contract offer. Spain, Women's Pro League. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. The words blurred together, my heart pounding in my chest. This was real. The scout from the winter. Charity game wasn't just being polite. He'd actually pulled strings to get me a spot. If I accepted, I'd be leaving in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to pack up my life. 6 weeks to say goodbye. 6 weeks to make the biggest decision of my life. I knew I had to tell my dad first. So that night, I invited him over for dinner. Just him, no extended family, no drama, just us. We ate in silence for a while. Then, finally, I took a deep breath and said, I got an offer to play overseas. His fork froze midair. Overseas? In Spain. His expression was unreadable. You want to go? I swallowed. Yeah, I think I do. Dad nodded slowly, setting his fork down. Then you should. Just like that. No questions, no hesitation, just support. It should have been a perfect moment. But then, because the universe loves to mess with me, Margaret called. I let it ring. I wasn't in the mood. But my dad, he picked up. Margaret. He sighed. Now's not a good time. Pause. Then his face darkened. What do you mean she's making a mistake? I tensed. Margaret. Of course. She must have heard through the family grapevine that I was leaving. And because she couldn't stand not having the final say, she had to weigh in. Dad listened for a moment before cutting her off. No, Margaret. You don't get a say in this. I could hear her squawking through the speaker. Dad exhaled sharply. No. Olivia doesn't need your permission to live her life. And frankly, neither do I. Then, before she could get another word in, he hung up. And that was it. That was the moment I knew. I was done letting Margaret control my choices. A week before I left, I got a text from Vanessa. Vanessa, Mom wants to see you before you go. I stared at my phone. I hadn't spoken to Margaret since that night. And now, suddenly, she wanted a meeting? I wasn't sure why I agreed. Maybe I just wanted closure. So, the next day, I met her at a small cafe. She was already sitting when I arrived, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. She looked the same, polished, composed, like she had never lost a battle in her life. I sat down. All right, Margaret, what do you want? She sighed. I don't understand why you're doing this, I scoffed. Because it's my dream? Margaret shook her head. No, Olivia. I mean, why you're leaving us. I blinked. She actually thought this was about her. I leaned forward. Margaret, I didn't choose to leave this family. You chose to push me out. She flinched, but I kept going. You made it clear over and over that I didn't belong. So don't act surprised that I found people who actually treat me like I do. Margaret looked down at her tea. For the first time, she seemed small. I just thought... She trailed off. I thought you'd always be here. I sighed. That's the thing, Margaret. You don't get to ignore someone and then expect them to stay. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she nodded. I suppose you're right. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest she'd ever come. I stood. Goodbye, Margaret. And for the first time, it really felt like goodbye. The day I left for Spain, Dad drove me to the airport. You nervous? He asked as we walked toward my gate. A little. I smiled. Mostly excited. He nodded. Good. You should be. We reached the security line and I turned to face him. Dad. I hesitated. Are you okay with this? He gave me a soft smile. Liv, I'm more than okay with it. Then he pulled me into a hug. A real one. The kind that made my throat tighten and my chest ache. And then, with one last wave, I walked through security, leaving behind a past that had tried to keep me trapped, and stepping into a future that was finally mine. A year later, I was standing on a court in Madrid, heart pounding as the crowd roared. I had made it. I had played my first pro season. I had met incredible teammates. I had built a new life. And Margaret, she never reached out again. And honestly, I didn't need her to, because I had found my real family, one that actually showed up. And in the end, that's all that really mattered.